Welcome, everyone. My presentation today consists of discussing the dataset I chose, addressing the business problems raised from the COVID-19 situation, cleansing the dataset, and finally evaluating the dataset and solving the business problems with graphs and charts. Since we are currently dealing with the COVID-19, I decided to pick a dataset that focuses on the current COVID pandemic. This dataset looks at the COVID-19 trends related to cases, hospitalizations, associated deaths taking place in Connecticut counties. The data consists of daily updates starting in July 2020 from different Connecticut counties. It is vital to note that the data set is updated daily, which means the next day data contains the previous day plus new updates. Therefore, each new day is a build-up of the previous day, and the final day, which is at the end of the year, which would be December 2020, would contain the build-up from the previous days before that, up until July 2020. The main objective of this presentation is to solve the business problems using the dataset. First, which Connecticut counties have the highest amount of COVID-19 cases? This would allow us to know which counties would need the most government intervention. It would help us to know how to effectively allocate resources to battle the pandemic. Second, which Connecticut counties are the most at risk for increased COVID-19 outbreak? We need to be able to predict who will be hit the hardest by another wave. Third, which counties are likely to have the highest vulnerable population, which includes elderly and people with pre-existing conditions? These people are more vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19, and a diagnosis could potentially lead to death. Therefore, focus needs to be on the counties with high amounts of vulnerable population. Lastly, how effective is the Connecticut healthcare system on dealing with COVID-19 incidents? It is vital to know if our healthcare system has the resources to effectively battle COVID-19. After establishing the business problems, I needed to clean the data. I started by creating a copy of the raw data, then I mass deleted any unwanted and unnecessary columns and rows using the filter columns. Then I checked for duplicates. The data had no duplicates. Then I arranged the data by county so the data set would be easier to read and understand. I focused on the last quarter of the 2020 year, using only the months September, October, November, and December of each county. Therefore, the other months were deleted. Then I decided to further narrow the data set by only focusing on data collected and updated on the first day and last day of each month. As you can see, the 1st and the 30th of most of the month of each county, to show the trends from the beginning of the month to the last day of the month. As you can see, the clean data is ready for us to evaluate. We're able to see the counties clearly, and we're able to see the dates in order. Once the data was cleaned, I first wanted to look at the total confirmed COVID cases of all the counties to understand which county would need the most government intervention. I used a highlight table detailing the total confirmed case for each county by the end of 2020. The highlight table helps to spot the main interesting values. As you can see, Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven have the higher significance COVID cases as opposed to the other counties. From the gradient highlight, we can see a large difference between these Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven and the other counties. Next, I went on to look at predicting who would be hit the hardest by another wave by evaluating which Connecticut counties are the most at risk for increase in COVID-19 outbreak. The best way to visualize it was using a bar chart to display the probable cases. A bar chart is used to compare multiple categories. The probable cases show a trend in potentially new outbreaks. As you can see, Fairfield has the highest amount of potentially new outbreaks, followed by New Haven, Hartford, Litchfield, Middlesex, Tolland, New London, and Windham seem to have the most control over COVID-19 because they have the least probable cases, and there's a deep dive all from 4,000 all the way to 81. As you can see, so Fairfield is right now the highest at risk for a new wave. Next, I wanted to evaluate which counties are likely to have the highest aging population and people with pre-existing conditions by comparing total cases with total deaths. I used a tree map diagram. As you can see, though Fairfield has the highest number of cases because it's the biggest, Hartford has the highest number of deaths because it's the deepest in color. New Haven is similar to Fairfield in terms of number of cases and number of deaths. It's also less than Hartford. This means that Hartford might have a more vulnerable population than Fairfield because they have more deaths, though they have less cases than these two. However, the diagram also shows that New London, Middlesex, Lynchfield, Windham, and Tolland in this area have significantly lower cases and deaths because they're smaller in size and, like I said, they're almost translucent. They're very little in color. Finally, the last chart answers the remaining question. How effective is the Connecticut healthcare system on dealing with COVID-19 incidents? The best chart for this was a side-by-side bar chart to compare total deaths and total cases. These two variables show us the trend of recovery. It allows us to evaluate if our resources are enough to treat COVID-19 incidents. As you can see, for all of the counties, total deaths was significantly less than total cases. This means that most people are able to recover with the health resources our government has. As you can see here, this is way more than this, and as it goes down, it's the same thing. For my dashboard, I put different charts and tables to effectively present my ideas. I use tree map diagram, bar chart, highlight table, and side-by-side bar chart. For the tree map diagram, we can observe that Fairfield has more cases, but Hartford has more deaths than both Fairfield and New Haven. The color gradients from this shows the total deaths. So the lighter the color, the least the amount of deaths. So therefore, these counties, New London, Middlesex, Windham, Lyncham, Tolland, have the least amount of deaths. And because they're also small in size, they have the least number of cases as compared to these three. For people in vulnerable populations, COVID can lead to death. Therefore, death trends give us an idea of who has the most vulnerable people, and that would be Hartford, because Hartford has more deaths than all other counties. Even though Fairfield has the most total cases, they have 100 less deaths than Hartford. So we would say that Hartford has more vulnerable people. From the bar chart, we can see that Fairfield has the highest amount of potential new outbreaks, followed by New Haven and Hartford. This means that Fairfield is the highest risk for a new wave. As you can see, Lynchfield, Middlesex, Tolland, New London, Windham barely have any new outbreaks. So there's a deep dive from 4,000 to 81. For the highlight table shows Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven have significantly higher COVID cases as opposed to the other countries. As you can see, the side-by-side bar chart shows that all countries have fewer deaths than total cases. So if you want to know the recovery trend, the chart shows a positive rate of recovery because the total deaths are so low compared to the total cases. It means most people are recovering. As you can see, this total cases for Fairfield is 58,288, while the total deaths is only 1,720. That means a vast majority of people are recovering. For the highlight table, the gradient highlight shows a large difference between Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven and the other countries. Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven are so deep in color while the other counties are almost translucent. The dashboard effectively shows the government's need to focus its attention on Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven because they lead in COVID-19 incidents. The allocation of resources would need to take that into account. In conclusion, let's answer the business questions. Which Connecticut county has the highest amount of COVID-19 cases? That would be Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven. Which Connecticut counties are the most at risk for increased COVID-19 outbreak? Fairfield, followed by New Haven and Hartford. Which county is likely to have the most vulnerable population? Hartford might have the most vulnerable population. How effective is the Connecticut healthcare system on dealing with COVID-19 incidents? With significantly fewer deaths than cases, the healthcare system is effectively dealing with COVID-19 incidents. These are my references. I got the data from data.gov, and that would be all. Thank you.